All right, my friends, back now on The Pulse, diving into all things people, power, and politics. And it's a story that has so many people talking, those mysterious drones flying over parts of New Jersey. And on this show, we're going to make sure we unpack every inch of this story. Here with a law enforcement perspective, Oakland County Sheriff Mike Bouchard. And Mike, it's always good to see you, Sheriff. You wrote a letter to Congress, and you basically said, let's just look at some numbers here. Look at the violations that are happening year to date. Yep. And the numbers are staggering. What did you tell them?
Yeah, well, I mean, just year to date, year over year has gone up exponentially. Year to date, 729,000 airspace violations, meaning they did things in the airspace that they were not allowed by rule or law. 664,000 violations in airport airspace. Now, that's super dangerous.
Yeah,
you put one of these in a crewed aircraft flight path, 13,000 over power infrastructure. Well, we've seen them used against power infrastructure around the world to blow up key power and infrastructure sites. 14,000 over correctional facilities. There was a gang that was arrested and charged in Georgia for dropping drugs, cell phones, and weapons into the prison yards. Now imagine if you've got somebody dropping a gun into the prison yard.
But you also have a drone that in Ecuador exploded right into a correctional facility.
It blew it up.
And so you have all of these staggering numbers. The letter that you wrote to Congress says, you know what? You got to do something. And you're not just soft about this. You're actually saying do something yesterday. What is the biggest problem that you see? What is standing in the way?
Well, Congress has to give the FAA the authority to give us the authority to have interdiction capability. That's all that's standing in the way. Years ago, I had a PO to go buy interdiction machinery, so if something was a danger to the community or breaking the law, we could intervene and try to safely end that threat, that problem. And Washington not only didn't help, they got in the way and prevented that purchase.
Okay, I got to pause there. So you're telling me that you at Oakland County, which is one of the most populous counties in Michigan, said, hey, we got to get some anti-drone technology for us because we're worried about people getting hurt. You asked Washington. Washington said, no, can do.
They said, we won't let you do it. Not only is it not something that we will help you with, we're going to actively stand in your way.
No explanation as to why they would stand in the way?
You know, there's different people that have different theories about how this is going to be used, but the fact is the only time it would or could or should be used is when it's putting somebody or something in danger and breaking a law. Those two are the parameters. There's a ton of hobbyists that fly drones. Great, good on them. Follow the rule, follow the law. But if you're a drunk driver driving a car, driving the wrong way on the freeway, we want to stop you from doing that. If you're driving the right way and not drunk,
drive a car.
Have it at your car.
So let's talk about if it's your drone out in New Jersey. Take us there for a moment and talk about what the biggest issue you see here. The drones are flying dozens a day. People are concerned. Are these accurate sightings? Do you believe that people actually are seeing drones, or do you think they're seeing helicopters and planes as well?
Well, I think at this point, because so many people are looking at the sky, it's a mix. But there's advanced drone detection capability, UAS, unmanned aerial systems, and there are other kinds of systems that tune in on frequency and other kinds of things. Those systems exist. So if Washington just decided, hey, let's engage, something might be going on here, rather than let it fester for weeks, because after weeks, probably some people are popping up their drones to see what's going on and maybe see if they could follow the other things. Now you're adding to the traffic. Early on, they could have got in there with the right equipment and said, this is nothing to be concerned about, or this is somebody breaking the law, or this is something we're not sure what the intent is. That is available. They have those systems already in the Department of Defense and Homeland Security. They won't let local governments have or use it.
And whether you like it or not, everything goes down to politics. You heard President-elect Trump say this administration should be addressing this. They should be talking about it. And people are concerned, and they're saying there's nothing to be concerned about. These drones have flown over military facilities, nuclear plants, and also Trump's Bedminster golf club.
100%.
Why would anyone say that's okay? In what world? I mean, I kind of like, as a journalist, I just sit here and go like, why would the government say there's nothing to see here when there's everything to see everywhere?
100%. And not only that, you know, the person that actually shot President-elect Trump did drone flights as pre-operational surveillance. You know, if you look at this tactically, here's the scary thing. they could see him when he was shooting and thankfully could engage him. But what if he did pre-op surveillance, determined where the stage was, and now he's a half-mile away when Trump goes up on there. No one sees him, and that drone comes in very quickly at treetop height, and it can be weaponized. You know, the NFL has one of their highest priorities to give authority to protect NFL football games because they've had serious problems. They had to shut down one of the playoff games a year ago. And thank God it wasn't weaponized, but it's not because we're good, it's because we're lucky. And so I applaud the NFL for seeing this threat. Major League Baseball is one of the biggest proponents now as well because they've had serious problems. But everybody deserves protection. What about the Dream Cruise? What about the regular parades in a community, concerts, all of those mass venues? There were 12,000 mass events and entertainment venues that were incurred by an unknown drone.
Violations of airspace. We got to take a break here, but I did have a question about what can people do? Do they call their lawmakers? Do you call Representative Haley Stevens, Debbie Dingell, John James, and do you say, you guys got to do something? What do you say? What do you,
well, thankfully, you know, the names you just rattled off have been very supportive of law enforcement and the safety concern, but there's a few people in Congress that have stood in the way for false and nonsensical reasons for protecting the community. And if and when we have a tragedy in one of their community events at a parade or a football game, shame on them. They'll be holding a hearing, ask it why it happened, and I'm telling you right now, it happened because you didn't do something and sat by for years. Yeah,
those congressional hearings can be like getting a root canal after something already happens, and they have a hearing, wagging their fingers at people after that. We have some questions from you at home. We're going to be asking the questions right to the sheriff coming up next. Plus, what about UFOs? An expert on UFOs weighs in on this whole drone mess. You heard me right. The Pulse is back in 3 minutes. All right, back now on the Pulse. You know the mission: people, power, and politics. And tonight we're talking about drones. And you know what? There's so many people who are talking about this. Our own Jessica Dupnack on the Pulse tonight to tell us what a UFO expert has to say about the things that they're noticing. Take a listen.
Thank you, Roop. Yeah, we talked to one of the state's leading UFO experts, Bill Konkoleski, and we straight up asked him about these drones, if he believes that maybe this signifies some sort of extraterrestrial connection or even aliens. Now, his response to that question was absolutely not. He's been studying the skies for about 30 years or so, and he says when the UFO community, they study these alleged sightings, they look for technology that is otherworldly, things that are beyond what we can create here on Earth. In his opinion, he believes these drones are commercially produced. Now, another point that Bill, the UFO expert, wanted to underscore is his criticism of how the federal government has been handling this, sort of a PR disaster, if you will. He says you can't quite say that there's no threat without giving the general public more context. He is waiting patiently for some more details from the feds. Roop, back to you.
Hey, Jessica, on the Pulse for us tonight. Thank you. I have to agree here. I mean, at some point, if you keep telling me that my house isn't on fire, but I smell smoke and I feel like my house is on fire, and you tell me it's going to be okay, I'm not going to trust you. People shouldn't just trust everything that people say here. Aaron Tobin is writing in on the Pulse. He said Sheriff Bouchard is on the record saying that he thinks these drones are a threat. You made that clear here today. Does he think our government is lying to us about them? Does he think the government knows more than they are saying?
Well, I think the DOD and Homeland Security has capabilities to detect and to analyze things that we don't have, they won't give us at the local level. So lying, very possibly, or just asleep at the switch and now they're trying to scramble. But why wouldn't they have sent detection equipment, advanced detection equipment out sooner than later, especially when you're talking military bases or critical infrastructure? Figure out what the heck's going on. Is it a threat? Is it a lost hobbyist that doesn't understand the rules? Is it a foreign adversary? Has it been weaponized? None of that they've answered other than saying we don't think it's a problem. Nothing to see here. And that's a problem to not be transparent when you have the skill set.
Well, and also it's our taxpayers' dollars that pay their salary, and we're asking them, keep me safe. we pay your salary in Oakland County. If you just mysteriously have things happen and you have no explanation, you better believe me as a reporter, I'd be knocking at your door saying you owe us an answer here. Let's talk about this next question. John Ashford asked this: why can't department helicopters work shifts to track them once spotted? Interesting.
Well, here's the challenge. What you don't want to do is, if something's operating in a hostile or an adversarial manner, or it's operating illegal and going into crewed aircraft space, you don't want to set up a collision. So at the Dream Cruise, we had people operating drones illegally, passing the legal height limit, which was 400 feet. They were up at 1,480 feet. They were a risk to our crewed aircraft, our helicopters, keeping the Dream Cruise safe. You don't want a mid-air collision, so you wouldn't necessarily want to send a helicopter to look at something you can't identify. There are systems the federal government has access to that can and should have done it, and they should have been transparent about what they saw. And if they didn't deploy it, they should say, our bad, we need to be more reactive and capable, and we're not, and here's what we have to do.
Let's talk about another question that people are asking. Hey, that's New Jersey. It's far away, far enough away at arm's length that I don't have to worry about it. But Yuma asked the Pulse this question, saying, hey, hypothetically, of course, what if this was in Orion or Walled Lake? Is there policy or procedure here? Are you required to report this kind of thing to the FAA or other coordinating agency? What happens if someone calls you and they tell you this is happening in our area?
Well, so if somebody says there's a drone up operating, in an odd way or a suspicious way, we'll send somebody out to, one of our cars or deputies to look. We have drone detection capability at the sheriff's office, and we can determine about 85% or more of the actual drones that are typically used in America. But that, again, doesn't allow us to do anything if it's operating in a criminal or an adversarial way. If it's approaching a high school football game in Orion,
sure,
as was just mentioned, and it's weaponized, we can detect it. We know where it is. We can even track where the person flying it is. But all we can do then is watch. And that's a scary thing in today's world.
I want to end with a very important cautionary warning for everybody out there. These drone hunters and people who kind of take the law into their own hands. There is a very hefty fine, and you could really hurt a lot of people if you try to take down a drone. That's really important not to try to do that on your own, right?
Yeah, it's actually against federal law.
Yeah.
I believe it's a $5,000 fine plus a 20-year felony,
yeah,
because it falls under aircraft,
yeah,
that you're shooting at an aircraft. And obviously it's not a good idea because you don't know where those rounds are going to go, and you don't know what is on that aircraft and where it's going to land. I understand the frustration and sometimes the concern, but that's not the way to deal with it. There are ways to deal with it. The federal government, Congress needs to give us the authority to protect the community. Again, drone hobbyists, great, have a blast. Just like our analogy, if you're driving a car,
sure,
doing it legally, drive anywhere you want. You're driving drunk the wrong way on a freeway, we've got to figure out a way how we're going to stop that.
Biggest concern in 15 seconds that you have, what's their overall synopsis of that?
Just give locals and state the authority to do what federal government already has, but they don't do. Yeah. There's very few teams in the country that will do this, and they have to be moved only to special events, which leaves everybody else with no protection.
Sheriff Mike Bouchard, always good to see you. As we continue to watch this unfold, I hope you'll come back and talk to us. And thanks for answering our viewer question as well on The Pulse. That is The Pulse for tonight. Extra is next. I'm Roop Raj. Have a good night, everybody.